Welcome everyone to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for August 24th, 2020. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the committee, and we will begin by taking the roll.
Councilmember Krikorian.
Here.
Councilmember Price.
Here.
Councilmember Koretz.
Here.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
Councilmember Bonin.
Bonin present.
5 members present and a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you very much. Members, we have a very long agenda today, so we're going to try to move through as expeditiously as we can. What I'd like to propose is that we take up, when we get to that point after public comment, that we will take up on consent items 12, 13, 15 through 20, 22, 24, and 25. So that will be my proposal, unless any members want to call any of those items special for report by staff or to answer questions by staff. And you have a moment to think about it if you'd like, because the first item we're going to take up is item number 9. We're going to hear this from the CAO, and then we will go to public comment. But if you can, before we go to public comment, let me know whether you want to call any of those items special so we can release staff for the remaining items. So with that, we'll go ahead and call item number 9.
Item number 9 is the City Administrative Officer Report relative to the adjusted 2021 city budget as of July 1, 2020. This is Jacob Wexler from the Office of the City Administrative Officer. This report essentially is a reflection of the changes that the City Council and Mayor made retroactive to July 1. It doesn't reflect the official city budget, but it's the changes that were made during the course of the month of June by your committee and then ultimately by the City Council and the Mayor to shift funds around effective July 1 of this fiscal year. We release this report for informational purposes so that the public and the council and the mayor would sort of have the starting point, the actual starting point for the budget for this fiscal year. It's similar to the budget resolution, which we've released in prior years, to kind of have a document out there, as this information will not be reflected in any other document that's sort of publicly available. We do have one amendment. We made a typographical error on the report on page 14 for the police department's budget. There's a source of funds, a couple of errors for that. The general fund amount should be $1,660,349,446, and the total funds in the source of funds, which would match the expenditure column above, is $1,721,292,382. And with that, we're available for any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Wexler. Mr. Kretz. And you're muted, Mr. Kretz. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. Are changes in revenue and updates reflected in this, or is this just reflective of the changes council made during the month of June?
This is simply reflective of the changes that council made through discussions in the month of June and then in July, retroactive to July 1st. There's no updates to our estimated revenues for this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, members? Mr. Blumenfield?
No questions.
Oh, okay. Very good. Well, we'll go ahead and hold this one on the desk for the moment, and we'll proceed to our public comment. I'd like to ask the clerk to read out the public comment information for the members of the public who may be listening.
Thank you. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160 655-3266 and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a long agenda, so we'll be limiting public comment to a maximum of about 45 minutes. We'll ask each speaker to limit their comments to 2 minutes on agenda items on today's agenda, and an additional 1 minute for general public comment for issues that are not on today's agenda. And with that, we'll go ahead and begin with our first speaker, our first public speaker.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
This is Mr. Bohr. I want you to understand personally and substantially enduring city services of this budget. Such restrictions have imposed a one-year ban.
Okay, I'm going to need you to stick to agenda items, or I'm going to ask you to go straight to your general public comment.
Listen, you fucking asshole. I'm talking. Do not interrupt me, please.
Okay, begin your 1 minute of general public comment, please.
Regarding case 220CR00326JFW, document 36, filed 7/30/20, page 3 of 113 pages of that fucking wetback and the developers, Jose Weezers, you fucking officials who scumbags allowed those developers and the billionaires, Mr. Chang, to fuck the people of the United States of America. Now, do you understand what I'm talking about? Defendant Jose Luis Weezer was a councilman for Council District 14, fucking pig wetback, and chair of the Plum Committee. So regarding Measure HHH, commercial and residential, for significant importance, 40 U.S. 1983, fuck you.
Thank
Your
you.
minute has expired.
Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
My name is Ariella Morrison. I'm speaking to item number 26.
Go right ahead.
I'm a senior staff attorney at One Justice, an LA Justice Fund capacity building grantee. Through our collaborations with nonprofit organizations, law schools, and law firms to increase representation for immigrants facing deportation in Los Angeles, we deeply understand the life-saving impacts of legal representation for immigrant communities impacted by increased immigration enforcement and unjust and racist policies targeting immigrant communities. The LA Justice Fund is a critical legal safety net for immigrant Angelenos facing deportation. I'm calling in to share One Justice's as well as my personal full support for and urge you to approve item number 26 to ensure that the LA Justice Fund can continue for current and future cases in the city of LA. We urge you to approve this item to ensure the increased flexibility to serve all eligible cases, both current and new. It's important to note that this amendment does not require the addition of new funds. Rather, it grants LA Justice Fund lawyers the flexibility that they need to meet the greatest need right now while the COVID-19 crisis lasts. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Yes, this is Rabia Sen with Esperanza Community Housing. I'm speaking to item 26. We urge you to approve item 26 to ensure the continued operation of the LA Justice Fund for current and new cases in the city of Los Angeles for the coming year. We urge approval of this item at the full funding level of $1 million, including the amendment to allow LAGF providers the flexibility to serve both current and new cases. This will ensure increased efficiency in the use of funds to maximize the benefit to our immigrant communities. It does not, I repeat, it does not require the addition of new funds. What it does do is answer the moment right now in this pandemic while our communities face intensified attacks from ICE. It just allows LAJF lawyers to use the funds to meet the greatest need right now while the COVID-19 crisis lasts. Both the CLA and the independent evaluation team, VERA, report that not only has this program met expectations, it's also exceeded them, and that there still remains a critical need for this program during this pandemic especially. We need LAJF renewed at its full level of $1 million to ensure a complete, just recovery for all Angelenos. We can't afford to let anyone be left behind. We can't stand by and watch our neighbors and our families torn apart in the middle of a crisis. LA's immigrant communities who are Angelenos need to know that this city stands behind them. We cannot afford any further delays. We need this right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
My name is Tess Feldman. I'd like to speak on item number 26.
Go right ahead, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Tess Feldman. My pronouns are she, hers, and I thank the entire committee for their time and attention today on this matter. I am the direct services attorney at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, where I work primarily on LAJF cases for our immigrant friends and neighbors. And I'm proud to be a part of this group of wonderful allies and advocates commenting today to seek continued funding of this incredible program. The LA Justice Fund has created incredible infrastructure in the community over the 2 years of its existence. And now, in the time of crisis in the middle of a global pandemic, I want to share with you all that the infrastructure is working. Our LAJF clients at the LGBT Center live at our Center for Youth and Family Services homeless shelter. This funding is ending homelessness because they have an attorney through LAJF and we're connected to services. LAJF clients who are seniors are receiving mental health care at the Los Angeles LGBT Center and with our partners through this program at the Program for Torture Victims. When COVID-19 brought new crises to our clients, I connected them to our new Pride Pantry food bank that we've opened at the center. And when our indigenous 16-year-old client from Guatemala couldn't get through to communicate with his teachers at LAUSD, we helped him get a laptop and language support to continue his education. This is the support from the LA Justice Fund immigration attorneys. It's so much more than immigration representation in the immigration court and detention centers, which is essential. Our clients are using the stability gained through their legal representation to do good work in the world on their own. Last week, an LAJF client was a named plaintiff in federal litigation out of the federal court in Ohio to sue immigration for breaking the law as it relates to employment authorization documents. Our client, funded by the LA Justice Fund, stood up for the rights of 80,000 other immigrants around the United States. We absolutely
Speaker, your time is up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Speaker, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hello, my name is Bruno, and I would like to speak on item number 26 and general public comment.
Go right ahead.
I live in District 13, and I've lived in Los Angeles all of my life. I express my full support for and urge you to approve item number 26 to ensure the Los Angeles Justice Fund can continue for current and new cases. Since November 2017, when the LA Justice Fund program started, since the inception, 546 children and adults have been connected to a free lawyer to help them get free from ICE detention and or fight deportation. This is because of the Los Angeles Justice Fund. DHS, which ICE is a part of, is the largest law enforcement agency in the country. Children and adults facing deportation are forced to go up against ICE and DHS attorneys alone in immigration court. According to Syracuse University, 67.6%, 68% of all immigrants in deportation proceedings in the Los Angeles Immigration Court do not have an attorney. The same data demonstrates that immigrants who have access to legal representation were 4 times more likely to win their cases than those who were unrepresented. Currently, detention and deportation can turn into a death sentence during the COVID-19 pandemic. The LA Justice Fund has reunited hundreds of families and provided legal defense to immigrants and asylum seekers in Los Angeles facing the life-threatening impacts of detention and deportation. I am urging you to support the funding allocated for LA Justice Fund and to ensure the protection of immigrant communities in Los Angeles. LA Justice Fund is not enough. It was a pilot program for 2 years, and we saw that it works, and it's successful, and it protects immigrant communities from the abuses and human rights violations that ICE is committing against migrants and asylum seekers. As COVID-19 rages on, LA City Council must not deny legal representation to new cases. We need the LA Justice Fund program renewed at its full level of $1 million to ensure a recovery for all immigrants in Los Angeles, protect immigrant communities from the administration's xenophobic and racist policies and laws, and to ensure due process rights are protected for all asylum seekers and immigrants. Children and adults are going to court alone. LA Justice Fund has provided a lawyer so immigrants and asylum seekers have someone on their side to help them navigate the most complicated legal system, the immigration court system, that our country consists of. So I urge you, me and people on this phone and thousands of people in the streets and on social media, we urge you to renew the Los Angeles Justice Fund and to stand in solidarity with immigrants and asylum seekers in Los Angeles as they defend themselves against the brutal and vicious attacks by ICE, DHS, and this administration.
Caller, your time is up.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Yeah, hi, it's Daniel Gus. Items 8, 11, and general public comment, please.
Right ahead.
Thank you, council member. For item number 8, I read a column on, I think, lawyer.com the other day, said that the big firms are getting rid of underperformers and rewarding the high-performing attorneys in their offices. That's great. The city attorney's office has close to 600 attorneys, and I think in this time of austerity where we're cutting millions of dollars from animal services as one example, and all of the other departments, I think it's time we have a thorough audit to find out how much of these contracts we're giving to high-end outside firms could or should be done by the city attorney's office, and find out why Mike Fewer's office is requiring outside help. Obviously, if there's a specialty type of legal service coming from, Case and White or whichever these other firms that we're hiring, that's understood. But it seems that a lot of these projects could be done by Mike Fewer's office, and it'd be a good idea to do an audit of them while we're cutting everybody else to find out where we're pouring more money into work that the city attorney's office can't do. So on to item number 11. This is a great idea, but it's not enough. First and foremost, it's a great idea if people are simply poor, let alone dealing with the COVID pandemic. This is a great idea. We're going to take a few dollars less for members of the public who are poor, whether or not they're dealing with COVID, and that way the city will have to spend less money caring for the animals, feeding them, providing them veterinary care, providing them employee supervision and recreation and all of the stuff that goes with it. This is a great idea, but why are we limiting it just to people who are enduring from the COVID crisis? We should be doing this for people with, let's say, under $40,000 of income for the first time. If the dog gets lost and comes back into the pound, okay, then you want to charge them a fee. But this is a great idea. Now, in 2014, Herb Wesson asked me, I know it may surprise some of you, Mr. Caress is aware of this, he asked me to provide a list of all of the ways that animal services is inefficient. This was one of them, and it was never audited by Ron Galperin's office. There are so many great ideas like this, and when I'm done with my 2 minutes, please let this bleed over into general public comment. The city has a 90-page report from me that was solicited by Herb Wesson in January of 2014. I provided all of these efficiently ways to make greater use of animal services money. This was one of the things that I recommended. This is a great idea. We should be doing more of it. The question is, why isn't animal services implementing more things like this? You take a few dollars less out of the pocket of poor people in Los Angeles, and you're saving.
Caller, your time is up.
What about my general?
It was 3 minutes, 2 and
Sorry,
1.
Mr. Oops,
that's
Mr.
all right.
Guest,
That's all right.
that was your 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Vetter. I'd like to speak on item 26.
Go right ahead, please.
Excellent, thank you. I ask that this committee approve the renewal of the LA Justice Fund at the full $1 million funding level for the whole one-year renewal, including the amendment that allows the Justice Fund providers the ability to serve ongoing and new cases. Immigrants with legal counsel in LA are much more likely to win their case than those without, and as ICE continues its attack on immigrants, the LAJF is critical to protecting the rights of Angelenos. We need the LA Justice Fund renewed and given the full $1 million to make sure all Angelenos receive a just recovery. I appreciate you all for taking the time to listen. I yield my remaining time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
My name is Lisa Okamoto, and I'd like to speak on item number 26.
Go right ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Okamoto. I'm the directing attorney with Immigrant Defenders Law Center. We provide legal representation to immigrants facing deportation through the LA Justice Fund. I express my full support and urge you to approve the item 26 for the LA Justice Fund for current and new cases in the city of Los Angeles. Now more than ever, the Justice Fund serves as a life-saving resource, and especially because immigration law and its enforcement is constantly changing, and unrepresented LA residents are more at risk of being deported without counsel, especially during this pandemic. Not only does the Justice Fund provide desperately needed representation, but it serves as the eyes and ears of accountability to combat inhumane practices. We urge the city to fund this Justice Fund and to allow flexibility to legal service providers so that we can act accordingly to the dynamic nature of immigration law. Just to provide examples, our office receives a call once a week from someone in detention who would have otherwise qualified for representation under the current LA Justice Fund. Even for those who are not detained, the pandemic has made representation crucial. At the moment, the immigration court has closed all of its non-detained courts, including the ones in Los Angeles. However, if open, some courts have allowed telephonic appearance to maintain social distance only for those who are represented. Unrepresented litigants may be forced to attend crowded courtrooms. There's no possibility of social distancing, where each courtroom can have about 100 people awaiting for their court hearing. Further, none of this information about court closures and reopenings are provided to the public in language other than English. There will be mass confusion and possible deportation orders without programs like the LA Justice Fund to provide representation. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Sarah Andre. I would like to speak on item number 26.
Okay, go right ahead.
On behalf of the Los Angeles LGBT Center, I express my full support for and urge you to approve item number 26 to ensure the continued operation of the Los Angeles Justice Fund for current and new cases in the city of Los Angeles for this next year. We urge you to approve this item at the full funding level of $1 million for the one-year renewal, including the amendment to allow LAJF providers the flexibility to serve both current and new cases. This will ensure increased efficiency and use of funds to maximize the benefit to our immigrant communities. This amendment would allow, but not require, LAJF providers who have capacity to take on additional cases to do so with the bridge funding for this next year. This is critical to ensuring that LAJF reaches as many people in this crisis as possible. It does not require the addition of new funds. It just allows LAJF lawyers to use the funds to meet the greatest need right now while the COVID-19 crisis lasts. LAJF has been critical in responding and spearheading efforts to mitigate the draconian and inhumane policies of the Trump administration. LAJF attorneys and advocates have provided and can continue to provide support and respite as they are on the ground in detention centers and in immigration courts tracking cases, seeing the changing policies, and developing real-time solutions that can be best practice models for others facing similar circumstances. Both the CLA and the independent evaluation team VERA report that not only has LAJF met expectations, but also exceeded them, and that there still remains a critical need for this program to protect immigrant Angelenos. We need the LAJF renewed at its full level of $1 million to ensure a just recovery for all Angelenos and to counter this administration's cruel detention and deportation machine. We cannot stand by and watch our neighbors and families torn apart in the middle of a crisis when we know that they have the ability to do something to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
This is Maria Mello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Maria Mello. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a policy and operations manager at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. I'll be talking on 6. I'm writing to express the center's, the LA LGBT Center's full support for and urge you to approve item 26 to ensure the continued operation of the Los Angeles Justice Fund for current and new cases in the city of Los Angeles. As an LGBT-identified woman, immigrant, and now U.S. citizen, mother of 2 and wife to another woman, I am a passionate believer in the United States and in Los Angeles in particular as beacons of hope for LGBT immigrants. As an LGBT, American, Jewish, Latino, Catholic, binational, multi-ethnic, multi-faith family that is here today because both of our families were able to immigrate to America to find safety and a place to thrive economically. I can say that all of us, all the 4 people in my family, we are proud to stand today as one of many, if not thousands of bridges that exist today between the immigrant community and elected officials such as you, as well as LA business leaders, nonprofits, and other LA families. My LGBT family of 2 women, 2 4-year-old little girls fully understand that we will only get through this crisis together. That is why, as LGBT members of your community, we urge you not only to approve this item to help our immigrant brothers and sisters, but also to pass the supporting language submitted by council members to the and proposed amendments, so we can help those families face the COVID crisis right now, not in 1 year. This amendment would allow, but not require, LAJF providers who have capacity to take on additional cases to do so with the bridge funding. More importantly, by taking on new cases, it allows LAJF lawyers to use the funds to meet the COVID-19 crisis at the time of its greatest need. Let's be clear. We all know that regardless of COVID-19, right now the administration has not seized attacks on the immigrant community. It changes laws every day. We all know that. And it's changing regulations, and more importantly, we all also have heard and know that ICE detention centers are not safe.
Caller, your time is up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Jason Ballou, and I'm calling about item 26.
Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. So I said, my name is Jason Ballou. I live in CD4, and I'm calling to express my full support for and urgently ask you to approve item 26 to ensure the continued operation of the Los Angeles Justice Fund for current and new cases in the city of Los Angeles. We have a moral, ethical, and uniquely American responsibility to support basic human rights. But especially on our own soil, we must ensure them. As an LGBT person, the very existence of a massive human warehousing system that goes unchecked and answers to no court is as frightening as it is unacceptable. I urge you to approve this item, including supporting language in Councilmember Cedillo's proposed amendment. This will ensure increased efficiency and use of funds to maximize the benefit to our immigrant communities. This amendment will allow, but not require, LAJF providers who have capacity to take on additional cases to do so with the bridge funding for this next year. I think that it's critical to ensuring that LAJF reaches as many people in this crisis as possible. It does not require the addition of any new funds. It just allows LAJF lawyers to use the funds to act now during the crisis to meet the greatest need. To be clear, we're talking about flexibility. By approving this item and the amendment today, you're giving legal service providers the flexibility to be responsive to a critical need that has been heightened by the pandemic. LAJF will help folks get out of detention during a pandemic, and we should all be fighting for the right to do that. Detention centers such as nearby Adelanto are denying sanitary conditions and medical assistance to immigrants in facilities with COVID-19 positive cases. As COVID-19 rages on, City Council should not and must not deny legal representation to new clients facing the Trump administration's expanded deportation machine, as well as the culture of hate and racism in the community. LAJF has been critical and...
Your time is up.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Yes, it's Eric Previn, and I'll speak on all items in the general public comment.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. First of all, item number 12 and 13 having to do with the outside counsel and the liability accounts are from different periods. The liability is through March 20, and I believe the outside counsel is through December 2019. You know, in there you can find everything. It is a compendium of disgusting litigations that are being poorly conducted by a group that has allowed these retaliation, discrimination, harassment, FIHA over and over and over again. And in the earlier item, low numbers, I forget what it is, 8 or so, you have top-offs for existing contracts with attorneys. Included is Hogan Lavelle, and you've set up with just the contract number, so I had to look. Up to $800,000 increase, but in fact the contract doesn't reflect that. It reflects $150 to $250. So this is just very strange. And the idea is that with that particular firm, there's a conflict. So they want Hogan Lavelle to agree not to do any work for the city, and they do agree. And there's just one little caveat, which is that unless Leela Kapoor says it's fine. So here's your hat, what's your hurry? That is just a ridiculous idea, and we don't agree. And in terms of the other great cases in there, at the very top of the list of liability payouts, you can see a case called George Abraham versus City of Los Angeles. What a horrible professional abnegation of their responsibilities. These attorneys at this firm, I believe it's Silverstein, actually, one of the treasured partners, who fights on the good side half the time. But here, he basically packed in the lawsuit that George Abraham started about the bunching of items, which I'm going to bring back in the context of a neighborhood council lawsuit, because Randy Freed has lost his mind. He brings people up to speak at Studio City Neighborhood Council, but he doesn't allow the public to comment on their comments. So that's ridiculous. Like the cop comes up and says, we've had an increase by 8% in crime, and now we'll go around the room. Does the public have any comments on that item? He won't allow that, because he makes you speak up front in a bunch section. We're going to challenge that finally once and for all. Also, you see Elizabeth Greenwood versus City Law. This is a appalling case in which a city attorney herself, who is the head of the city attorneys union in some way, or is suing the city because she got bit by a flea, which was never substantiated, got sick, was out, came back, now wants $5 million of city money. And Herb Wesson, who's running for County of Los Angeles, basically is considered, this falls way, way short, guys. And also, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to make it so that Myers-Nave is compensated fairly? I only see $6 million in the outside counsel report to this time going out the door to that particular firm. Is that enough for our in-house best friends? I will remind Councilmember Corcoran that we learned about Myers-Nave because they were disclosing a conflict with the county. Up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Previn. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Yes, Jerome of motherfucking Adams and General Public Comments. Yes. So, look at the litigation issues. We have Los Angeles Superior Court number 2, a nigger hit on a bicycle. Terrible, terrible. And then we have the abuse by the LAPD involving beating the living shit out of niggers, such as number 5, Floyd, Beverly Hills, Nelson, Business in Los Angeles, yes. Him and his Jew lawyer. Number 6, Dana Walker, being accused of being a nigger, actually not, beaten to death with a stick by LAPD. Report that motherfucker. Now we have outside counsel, and of course we know every sleazy Jew attorney corporate goddamn bitch like Paul Corretz and Buck Krikorian and Bluff Blair. They're sitting there, sticking their nose in the government cheese, swimming around in the fucking park. Sitting there, $700 an hour on staff. So compare number 8, please, for the record, and number 26. You let these fine men and women fight over a lousy $1 million while you give $890 million to corporate Jew motherfuckers to shuffle corporate paperwork and insurance cases. I agree with Dusadillo. I think this LA Justice Fund should get the full $5 million. $5 million to represent the poor. $5 million to represent reparations for Guatemalans and El Salvadorans. $5 million more, not $1 million. Again, it's all about being inside Uncle Tom's cabin in 2020. And we have other reports. One is by Sharon So at TSO Foods. She's doing a great job. Number motherfucking 25 and 24 are by my nigga brother Joe Buscaino. Giving away city property for $1 to non-profit. You're doing a great, great job. I wish the other 13 of you, including Mr. Bacon, would get on board. Take, for example, Mr. Herman in Boyle Heights. He needs a fire engine, and you didn't sell it to him for $1. You motherfuckers, you. Now we have, do I have my general yet, niggas? I try not to digress. Now, let's get into my
caller. Your time has expired.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Next speaker, please. Next speaker.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go right ahead.
Yes. My name is Audrey George. I want to speak on item number 26 and item number 23 and general comment.
Okay.
Regarding item number 26, I want you to approve full funding for the LA Justice Fund for all current and new cases. Item number 23, regarding Community Safety Partnerships Bureau. Funding for and staffing for this new bureau is not a conversation any city council committee that talks about reimagining public safety should even be discussing. CSP is a front for deep infiltration of the community, and it has already been expanded across housing projects. This is an expansion of surveillance and police powers under the guise of counseling, relationship building, providing guidance, etc. This is how LAPD holds the city finances hostage, by advancing the perception that CSP is a policing necessity and one that promotes public safety. CSP's origins lie in military-style counterinsurgency programs that are a how-to guide for maintaining the armed occupation of areas where poor black and brown people live. This is a deep surveillance program that even allows law enforcement officers to remove and clear out green spaces from neighborhoods for crime prevention through environmental design, is how they call it. I demand you vote no on number 23 and anything that affirms the mayor's attempt to make CSP a permanent part of policing in LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Bell, item number 26.
Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Chelsea Bell. I use the pronouns she and hers, and I'm a removal defense attorney at the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, one of the LA Justice Fund legal service providers. I started at IMDEF in 2018 and have had almost exclusively LAJF cases since then. I urge you to pass item number 26 and continue funding the Los Angeles Justice Fund as one of the most important safety networks that LA City has ever implemented and one of the most important programs we've used to protect our residents during this pandemic. The current incarnation of the Justice Fund motion allows for legal service providers to take new cases while continuing to represent their current LAJF cases. This does not mean an increase in funding, and actually the language really only gives legal service providers the opportunity to take new cases. There's no additional requirement to take new cases or any additional restrictions for funds to be exclusively used for new cases. It's purely about the flexibility we need to continue running LAJF as an efficient and impactful program. What this means for me as an LAJF attorney is that I would actually be able to start taking the calls that I personally receive on a weekly basis from people who are detained at Adelanto and in desperate need for legal representation and currently eligible for LAJF. Right now, I would be putting their name on the ever-growing wait list we have. But if we can pass this motion, I would be able to take their cases and assist in getting them released from detention. And as everyone before me has explained so well, LAJF is and has been successful. All we are asking is for the original program, which allowed for new cases, to be able to respond to the ever-growing changes in immigration law and with the global pandemic. It's hard to describe quite how important it is for someone to have an attorney in removal proceedings in immigration court, only because LAJF had built an infrastructure that was already in place at the time that COVID hit, were we able to respond so quickly and meaningfully to the current pandemic. As my colleagues have already mentioned, being in ICE detention has become a death sentence for some, and that is completely unacceptable. This is not news per se. Adelanto has been considered one of the worst detention centers in the nation for many years. Several government agencies have investigated
Caller,
claims
your time
to come
has
to
expired.
this conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, this is Stacy Stearns, and I would like to talk about item 23, 26, and make a general comment.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so item 23, y'all, we don't need any more police. You all know how the public feels about CSP, and you have to get out of bed with the LAPD. I know that's hard because you all are being intimidated. The amount of our money that has to be spent on lawsuits every year is a disgusting reminder that City Council is beholden to the LAPD, to Chief Moore, to the LAPPL, and every other subgroup and bullshit nonprofit in quotation mark that continues to forward an agenda of surveillance, criminalization of underserved Black and brown people. Help us out here, okay? Item 26, please. I'm calling in to urge you to approve renewing the Los Angeles Justice Fund at its full level of $1 million. Okay. I'm going on to the general public comment, guys. I just want to state that I stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter LA and the People's Budget, and I continue to urge the council members in this committee to examine your actions and decisions here and in the general council meetings to determine if you are aligned with your ambition or if you are aligned with the desire to meaningfully serve your constituents. Angelinos are suffering, and much of that suffering has to do with the choices that you and our grossly negligent absentee mayor make with our budget. And I want to repeat, our budget, not yours. Your hands are clutching purse strings that don't belong to you, okay? Please let go. While our calls for defunding the police manifested at $150 million cuts to the budget, that is not nearly enough. Every week I watch the council siphon and funnel funds back into the LAPD. Correct, you live to direct funds to the LAPD, but why do you not live to redirect funds into addressing the immediate crises that Angelinos are facing right now? If this perfect storm of unaddressed police brutality, lack of support for the unhoused Angelinos, lack of comprehensive rent and eviction moratoriums, and wildfires hasn't inspired you to find a sense of civic responsibility, then I'm not sure what will. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Thank
Next speaker, please. Next speaker.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Oh, sure. My name's Pauline Boyd, and I'm calling about item 26.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Just urging you to approve this item at the full funding level of $1 million for the one-year renewal, including the amendment to allow LAJF providers the flexibility to serve both current and new cases, and echoing the words of people who are also in favor of this that spoke before me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi,
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Morales, and I'm calling on behalf of Carecen. I'm calling to urge you to approve item number 26 to ensure the continued operation of the Los Angeles Justice Fund for current and new cases. We need the Budget and Finance Committee to pass the Justice Fund now. The COVID pandemic has not stopped this administration from continuing to attack immigrant families and immigrant families in Los Angeles. Detention centers such as Adelanto, which is the closest and second largest detention center in the United States, is currently denying sanitary conditions and healthcare assistance to immigrants, many of them who are Angelenos, who are in the detention center with many COVID-19 positive individuals as well. As COVID-19 continues to harm all of our communities, we need the City Council to take action and not deny legal representation to new cases. I urge you today to approve item number 26 at the funding amount of $1 million for a one-year renewal, including the amendment to allow the Justice Fund providers the flexibility to serve both current and new cases. This does not require the addition of more funding. It just allows the providers to use the funds to meet the greatest needs right now, especially under the pandemic, and it also allows us to be responsive to any future increase in immigrant attacks. Let's continue to take action to keep immigrant families together and free through the Los Angeles Justice Fund. It is the right thing to do, and it is the humane thing to do. I thank you for your time and your leadership on this, and we urge you to approve this item number 26.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, this is Mimi. I'd like to speak on item 26 and give general public comment, please.
Go right ahead.
I'm calling to support approval of item 26 at the full funding level of $1 million for the one-year renewal, including the amendment to allow LAJF providers the flexibility to serve both current and new cases. We need this item approved to prevent further wrongful and frankly cruel detention. We need to ensure detainees have legal counsel. I'm moving on to my general. I've been calling into these meetings for months now. It doesn't feel at all like any of you care about us. 30 people can call in and all say the same thing, and oftentimes you don't even do what we're asking. You guys make sarcastic remarks when we're passionate. Why are you in public service if you hate the public so much? Why are you in public service if you don't serve the public? Lastly, cancel the rent, take every last penny from the police. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariana Magaña, and I wish to speak on item 26.
Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. So as stated, my name is Mariana Magaña, and I'm calling here representing the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, also known as CHIRLA. But most importantly, I'm calling as someone who has been documented and who also forms a part of a mixed status family that is made up of U.S. citizens, legal residents, DACA recipients, and not. And any day fears the separation of family. I'm calling to support this item and to call on this committee to approve the full funding allocation of $1 million and to also support the amendment to allow for new cases. This requested amendment is simply to provide legal service providers with the flexibility to be responsive to the ongoing critical needs that has been heightened by the pandemic. As previously stated by many of my colleagues earlier, Adelanto Detention Center is one of the deadliest detention centers we have seen in recent and past history. At the moment, in 2 days, the Adelanto City Council was scheduled to discuss whether they were going to decide to expand that center and allow for more beds, therefore more bodies to be there. At times like this, it's urgent that the City of LA really respond and address the needs that some of immigrant Angelenos are facing on the ground, and we cannot turn our backs on our community members today. This amendment also allows us to continue doing the work simply as it is right now and allows for the operation of the program to continue functioning as it was started 2 years ago when Trump came into office. As stated by other folks, the federal administration continues to attack the immigrant community from left to right almost every week, having a new memo or new policy guidance that these attorneys and other attorneys need to continue to respond to. And therefore, we urge the committee to approve the percentage language to truly serve the best interests of the immigrant community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to our next speaker, members, I mentioned at the outset that I was going to propose as consent items number 12, 13, 15 through 20, 22, 24, and 25. Do any members wish to call any of those matters special or have any questions about those? Okay, we will take those up at the conclusion of general public comment, but I just wanted to let any staff who's here only to report on one of those items. We won't need to hear from you, so thank you very much for being here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take up the next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, Rob Kwan. I'd like to speak on item 26 in general public comment.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo everything that everybody said about the LA Justice Fund. You know, you all know how important this is. I think the concern here is, you know, what are the implications of continuing the Justice Fund and allowing it to take on new cases? But as has been said, this simply allows the option of taking on new cases, and you know, these service providers use extreme discretion in what kind of cases they take on and how they use these funds. I want to move on to well, I actually would like to continue on that. Just one thing, like today, I don't know if you saw, but the Trump administration has announced that they're going to ignore the Supreme Court's ruling on reviewing DACA requests. When we think about where this rest of this year is going, I don't think we should have any comfort in thinking that, you know, everything's just going to resolve itself. Even if Joe Biden wins, what's going to happen after that? And what's going to happen in that transition in power, and who's going to be targeted? Is this the time to really like wind down the Justice Fund in the middle of a pandemic when our immigrant community is effectively on the front lines of his, you know, white supremacist fascist march towards perpetuation of power? So I think it's just really important to not just look at things the way they are, but where they could easily spiral out to, and how you might be tying the hands of these service providers. You know, I want to move on to my general public comment and just mention that, you know, I've always found this committee to be, you know, really attentive to hearing public comment. We had 45 minutes today, and City Council offers us 30 minutes now. Pasadena is going to have 2 to 3 hours of public comment today on one major project. San Francisco's Budget Committee is hearing, you know, calls to defund the police. They started taking public comment at 10 a.m., and the anticipation is it's going to be like last week, where it goes from 10 a.m. till the end of the night. What is this council doing? Is this really the best way to come about process? And what are the unexpected outcomes, or how this, you know, polarizes the sentiment the public has towards you and changes that dialogue? It's really rare that I'll cite Gil Cedillo, but as he says, I believe respect begets respect, and this council offers very little of it towards the public. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on. Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Go right ahead, speaker. Speaker, go right ahead. Okay, we'll need to move on to the next speaker then.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on. Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Okay. Next speaker. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Tal. To speak on item 26.
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm a supervising senior staff attorney at Public Counsel. For over a decade, I've overseen Public Counsel's work on behalf of people in immigration detention, including our work under the LA Justice Fund. And I know from firsthand experience the difference that the LAJF has made in the lives of Angelenos trapped in ICE's unjust and deadly detention system. I'm ready to express my full support for and urge you to approve item 26 to ensure the continued operation of the Justice Fund for current and new cases. To be clear, the amendment would allow, but not require, LA Justice Fund service providers who have capacity to take on additional cases to do so with bridge funding. We think this is critical to ensuring that the Justice Fund reaches as many people in need as possible. It does not require the addition of new funds. It just allows us to use the existing funds to meet the greatest need, in particular for representation in bond and relief proceedings during the pandemic. In particular, we would be able to serve people like longtime Angeleno Pedro Bravo Castillo, who was arrested by ICE outside his home in mid-March despite stay-at-home orders. Mr. Bravo reached out for immediate short-term help to secure his release from detention during the pandemic, and many others have followed since. While we have strived to serve as many as possible with the aim of securing immediate release, we can't do so with current LAJF dollars because of the limitation on existing cases. With nearly 3.5 million immigrants living in LA and growing numbers of COVID cases in detention centers, including Adelanto, we ask this committee to approve the Justice Fund with the amending language that permits us the flexibility to serve as many Angelenos as possible, including securing their immediate release from detention in the midst of the pandemic. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller, please state your name and the item you wish to speak on. The caller has left.
All right, next speaker.
There are no more speakers, council member.
Very good. Well, thank you very much to all those who called in. We did get through the entire queue, so pleased that we were able to take everyone's comment. Members, that will take us back then to item number 9, and the proposal or the recommendation is that we note and file item 9. Do we need to have a roll call for note and files?
Yes, we've been doing so.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that then, please.
For item number 9, Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Koretz.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Thank you. Item 9 will be note and filed.
Okay, so on the consent items, I'm going to try to go through the entire list and read the recommendations so we can only take one roll call. Is that acceptable?
Sounds great.
Okay, so item 12, the recommendation is to note and file. Item 13, the recommendation is to note and file. Item 15, the recommendation is to approve the Office of Finance's recommendations to to escheat $505,000 to the general fund. Item 16, the recommendation is to note and file the Office of Finance's reports. Item 17, 18, 19, and 20 are refund claims, and the recommendations on those items are to approve the Office of Finance's recommendations. Item 22, the recommendation is to approve the motion. Item 24, the recommendation is to approve the motion. And item 25, the recommendation is to approve the motion. So with that, I think we can take those recommendations up collectively since members had no questions or concerns. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Koretz.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
5 ayes. These items will be approved per your recommendations.
Very good. Thank you very much. That will take us then to item number 10.
Item number 10 is a motion of Krikorian Buscaino relative to instructing the CAO to provide mid-quarter reports to the Budget and Finance Committee on the status of the city's finances, including updates on revenues, expenditures, the pace at which employees are subscribing to the separation incentive program, or the savings generated if it is implemented, and any other pertinent details that substantially impact the city's finances at its meetings on August 24th, October 26th, and December 14th.
Very good. Before we begin, the motion did provide specific dates for these report backs, but it's my understanding that the October date specified would have pretty much coincided with one of our FSRs in any event. So we're going to go ahead and propose that that be changed to September 14th. And with that, do we have someone who's going to be reporting on this matter?
Yes, Council Member. This is Ben Sahel, the City Administrative Officer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sahel.
Good afternoon. So, as the motion stated, we're here to provide an update on where we stand from the revenue perspective. The motion also talked about the separation incentive program, but I actually do not have an update to that, and will not be discussing it. I believe it will be discussed in the future executive employees committee, EERC, in one of the next meetings. I do want to state that we are currently not at the threshold amount that was set per the SIP, and so again, I do not have an update on that. I will not be discussing it in this report back. What I do have for you is just a preliminary review of where we ended the last fiscal year, and more of this detail will be provided in our first financial status report. But I do want to state that closing the fiscal year 2020, the preliminary numbers show that our revenues across the board were below our adopted budget, and that's no surprise given when we started the safer at home orders back in March and April, and the information we had at that point regarding our revenue for that fiscal year. I do want to state that it was at the end of the fiscal year we were marginally better than what we thought, but by marginally I mean between $6 to $10 million better. We thought we were going to be taking a reserve fund amount over $200 million. It's going to be coming in slightly below that amount. So again, it was not a great year for us, and we will have more numbers in the first financial status report related to how we ended last fiscal year. So as we're looking into this current fiscal year and where we stand, it's still very early in the year. As you all know, revenues, some of our more significant revenues do not start showing up until later in the fiscal year. The primary reason why we issue a TRAN, a tax anticipation note. Back in July, we did issue one. We have paid off our pension payments for both the fire and police pension and our civilian pensions. We do get a discount for making those payments, and we made those payments back on July 15th. So with regard to revenue, and actually before I begin, there are three main assumptions that went into the development of the current budget. One of them was on revenue, and the assumption back in March, April, and even going into June was that our businesses, our economy would be back, in somewhat normal shape around this time, and we all know that's not the case. we didn't assume a continued slowdown of our business activity through the current fiscal year. We did not assume, it even extending to, through the fall and into the winter, which is a big possibility, as we all know. So that is one of the main assumptions that currently has not come to fruition for us. The other two assumptions are tied to expenditures, and one is the savings on in implementing a hard hiring freeze. And while we do have a hiring freeze, while departments are subject to review of their request to hire, for the most part, departments are able to are being granted authority to hire. In particular, for classes like through the targeted local hire program and through other avenues of employment that departments are asking to gain authority to hire. And then the third one is the furloughs, and the furloughs were supposed to start back in July because of the separation incentive program and the we have not implemented those furloughs, and we're at a point where in order for us to get close to what is required per the budget on the furlough savings, those furloughs would have to start no later than late October for us to be close to the savings assumed in the budget tied to furloughs. So like I said, three of our main budget assumptions have not been implemented or are not coming to fruition, and that puts us in a really tough situation going into our first financial status report, which we plan to be bringing to you in October. Going a little bit deeper into revenues, out of the 7 major general fund revenue sources, 6 are all below plan. The only one that is currently at plan is our utility users tax, and that's based on that's derived from 3 sources: electric users tax, gas users tax, and communication users tax. All of our other major tax revenue sources are all below plan. Property tax, business tax, sales tax, documentary transfer tax, and the largest one that is has been hurting ever since the pandemic was started is our transient occupancy tax, otherwise known as our hotel bed tax. Just for perspective, we were down $73 million from budget in the last fiscal year. That made up in essence the majority of our shortfall on the revenue side. And with the pandemic and where we are still, it's not a revenue source that we think will be turning around anytime soon. We do have staff on the line that could provide more details around revenues and specific revenue sources, but I'll stop there for any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ceja. And for members of the public who are listening, the reason that these interim reports were especially important this year is that in a typical budget year, in a typical fiscal year, this committee hears financial status reports on an approximate quarterly basis. And I think we were all very well aware that the unpredictability of our revenue sources because of the COVID-19 crisis and the attendant business closures and other disruption of our economy would mean that this would be a highly volatile budget situation that would require more frequent examination of our revenue situation before we could make thoughtful decisions about expenditures, where we would need to make additional reductions, where we could make those reductions in a way that would cause the least harm to services to the public, and so forth. So that's the reason for today's report and why we'll be doing more of these in the interim between financial status reports. And I guess, Mr. Ceja, you are always very straightforward, but also very diplomatic. And so let me ask you a really blunt question, and let's try to get as much of a clear and straightforward answer on this as we can. In June, when we were examining potential changes to the mayor's budget, the Office of Finance reported that under the best case scenario, if businesses were back up and running by July, and we had a quick bounce back of our economy, revenues for this fiscal year would still be $45 million less than what the mayor had proposed in his budget or assumed in his budget. And that in a worst case scenario, if there were a delayed reopening, if the economy continued to suffer because of COVID-19, this fiscal year might see a shortfall as high as $450 million in revenues below what was assumed by the mayor. So as of what we know, or as of what we've learned in the last almost 3 months since we heard that report from Office of Finance, which appears to be the more likely outcome, the best case scenario or the worst case scenario? And can you put any clearer sort of outlier limits on those best and worst case scenarios for revenues as of this point?
At this point, I don't think I can provide those outlier limits. I think it's still too early to call. I do want to say it's not looking like our best case scenario, but it's also not looking like our worst case scenario. It's gonna, and largely because of property tax, because it makes up the majority of our general fund revenues. It's the biggest chunk, if you will, of revenue, and because our prices are stable. And our values are stable. I mean, that really protects a lot of what we do with regard to our general fund revenues. And the other kind of bright note is that while documentary transfer tax is driven both by volume of sales and by price, for a time there, the volume of sales was slowing down because, who wants to sell their home in the middle of a pandemic? But we're seeing some data now where sales are returning to some extent, not to where they were pre-pandemic, and it's going to take a while for us to get there. But that is another bright spot. So it's hard to tell exactly where we're going to land, but it won't be the worst case scenario at this point. Is basically what I'm saying, which is good, but it's still going to be a little bit worse than we thought going into the budget back in June and July.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And so to put that into a context, the mayor's budget, the mayor's proposed budget, had assumed furloughs of most of our civilian employees equivalent to 10% of their work time and salaries. It had also assumed revenues that were, from what you're saying, more than $45 million greater than what we are likely to see. So we have not implemented even 1 day of furlough for any employee yet, and we are likely to have more than $45 million in shortfalls in revenues beyond what the mayor had proposed. So when you combine that, the degree of impact that this budget is still going to feel by the end of the fiscal year is very significant. And it can only really be met with significant reductions in services, cuts in personnel. And so I just want to lay that out, as I will every chance I get, because every time we talk about adding new services, I think we have to do that in the context of understanding that there is no possibility whatsoever that we will even be able to maintain the existing city services that people count on us to deliver. So with that, I'll open it up to members. Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the hiring freeze, I'm not understanding why that isn't being implemented. I understand that we're hoping to continue doing targeted local hiring, but that also should be funded from part of the $150 million cut to LAPD. So that shouldn't necessarily, impact the overall general fund. Why are we hiring other people that are at the entry level?
Oh, and I may have been, not as clear in my description of what's going on with the hiring. We are just getting, and the CEO is part of the review process for through the managed hiring process. And what we're seeing is a whole lot of requests from departments. Departments do have vacancies they're trying to fill. They do have operations they're trying to and services they're trying to deliver on. So they are submitting requests to hire on those positions. What I'm saying is that as a CEO, and then we do our review, we make our recommendations. They're going to the mayor's office, and as part of the hiring process for this year, then they'll be going to a managed hiring committee as well. People want to deliver services, and departments want to deliver services. So we are also cognizant of that, and it's tough for us to say no with regard to some of these hiring requests. We're trying to say no, but sometimes departments are making a strong case for why they need to hire. All I'm saying is that for a hard hiring freeze, we're probably hiring more than what we probably have funds for at this point.
Yeah, obviously, if there are key positions that are crucial to the management of a department, I would hope we're not being completely hard. But if we're hiring a lot of folks that aren't required to manage a department, then we're probably not being totally responsible in how we're doing the hiring freeze. As far as furloughs, I thought around $40 million of that was supposed to come from the LAPD cuts, so I assume, once again, that wouldn't be having an impact on the general fund, and presumably there'll also be a significant savings from the SIP. So I'm presuming it would be a while before we would actually need to start furloughing until we reach the point that wouldn't be covered by those two items. And are there not other efficiencies and ideas out there to save money that we haven't gotten to yet?
Just on the furloughs and with regard to the 40 that was earmarked to address furloughs, all that gets us to is, like I said, is an October date, because of the furloughs were supposed to start in July, and they haven't, and now we're towards the end of August. Based on our calculations and the 40 that's been earmarked, and even a rough estimate of the savings that would come from the if the separation incentive program was implemented, that would still only get us to October, and so we still need the balance of the fiscal year to identify something else if it's not furloughs.
And do we have any sense where we land between the 45 million and the 450 million numbers? Because that's obviously a huge gap, and we don't really have an idea of where we are in it.
It's tough to say. Like I said, we do get monthly numbers on some of the revenue sources, but other sources won't come in until later in the fiscal year. Property tax, a bulk of it will come in December, and then business tax really doesn't start coming in until after January.
And we've expended a large chunk of money on our emergency needs, which we obviously are emergencies, but it doesn't seem like we're doing it with careful consideration of impact to the general fund. Am I assuming that most of the big, $100 million at a time decisions that we've made are anticipated to be covered by federal and state governments, or could they just be added on to our already very substantial shortfalls?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So we have problems, and we'll say, okay, let's put $100 million here for this program and $100 million there. They're all in response to either COVID directly or to the economic disasters that we face relating to COVID. So the question is, are we expecting those to be fully reimbursed by state and federal, or are we making decisions without really counting those dollars and piling up debt that we haven't accounted for?
Well, I mean, I don't think at this point that the funds that have been provided through the CARES Act allow for us just to make up for revenues lost, our general fund revenues lost. So it really is a question that others a little bit more in tune with the federal guidelines can perhaps answer. I don't know if we can just take the money that's been provided and just use it as general fund, take it into our general fund and use it in that manner. For the most part, it's reimbursing.
I'm just asking, what do we think the net impact is? Obviously, we'll try to use the federal and state funds as much as we can, and we're obviously not going to say, oh, we're just filling our shortfall in the general fund so we don't qualify.
But I think to that extent, to the extent that we want to use those funds for something like rental assistance and eviction prevention and things of that nature, those dollars are going out to the public, for uses by individuals and not coming into the general fund. So those are the decisions that U.S. policymakers are have.
Right. I think you're kind of missing my question. So there are obviously needs. We're making policy. Are we doing anything to track what's impacting our general fund? Because it seems like we've taken a lot of big number actions, and I haven't ever heard much of a connection to our budget. So we'll say, okay, we're helping $100 million worth of let's say rental assistance. I haven't heard anyone say, well, that's all coming out of our general fund, or we're hoping the federal government will cover all of it, or 75% of it. I don't have a sense that we're adding up those commitments. I just have a sense that we're just making them. So the question is, have we tracked them, and do we have an idea how much that's going to pull on our general fund?
These are all the discussion items.
I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately.
I think that's a pretty big question, and Mr. Chair, I would think we would want to be able to get an answer to that sooner rather than later.
Yes. Okay, thanks. Okay.
Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Blumenfield. Oh, you're muted, Mr. Blumenfield.
Saying just to start to pick up on what Mr. Koretz is saying, I think some of that is actually up to us. There's potentially $700 million in the CARES Act. We've allocated, probably close to half of it at this point. But if we were willing to if our goal was to get more of that back into regular services, and which I think makes sense to some extent, it's not that hard to do. We have so many expenses that are reimbursable, that emergency-related expenses, even all the police-related expenses, that could easily be used to draw down that care money and put it back into services. It wouldn't be a direct put back in, but it's certainly, the way I look at the numbers, and maybe the CAO can disabuse me of that, but that is a discretionary option that we have. If we specifically target, $200 million of CARES money to reimbursable functions that we might not otherwise reimburse, that's essentially putting money into the general fund. Is that not correct, CAO? Or Ben?
That's correct.
Okay. And I do think we need to think about that. We have a lot of things that we are critical things that we're spending with that care money, and the rental reimbursement is chief among them, as is the homeless, dealing with Judge Carter and spending $100 million there, critical. But we've got to think about our bottom line, as Mr. Koretz is saying, because otherwise we're in a world of hurt, not being able to do the basic things that we do as a city. Which I know so far both my colleagues have tried to push you on this, and I'll push you a little further. We're trying to get our head around how bad it is. And is there a projected revenue to date that we can compare to the actual revenue to date number, or is that not really available at this point?
We have some revenues through May, and we could compare those to what the plan was. And that was kind of formed the basis of my update. I'll give you a few examples. For business taxes, one of the revenues that we really don't start seeing until later in the fiscal year because of when the renewals start coming in, and on that one, the plan was $34 million. We're at $24 million, so about $10 million short. But again, that's one where it really shouldn't start picking up until after January. But if businesses aren't operating and are closed and or are struggling, I don't see a good, bright future for that one this fiscal year. Sales tax, we seem to be, running a little bit short through July. Not a whole lot, but again, this is one of our largest revenue sources. TOT just doesn't seem to have a bright side at the moment. We're already $4 million behind, and we already have reduced the TOT number for going into the budget by a substantial amount. Documentary transfer tax, we're about $5 million short of plan, and parking users tax, we again, with tied to economic activity, limited economic activity, I think there's limited revenue there as well. We already had reduced that quite a bit going into the fiscal year, and it's still short of plan.
And all those things, they're not really cyclical. So all those things we really could, if we projected out where we were and assume we're going to be in a similar situation in 6 months, that's a projection that would have some value, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the other one I missed, parking fines with reduced relaxed enforcement. That's going to lead to lower amounts. We're currently running $12 million short of plan. Taking all together, all the different revenue sources for the general fund, and we're looking at about compared to plan, we're below by $50 million compared to plan.
And that's just at this point in time.
That's just at this point in time, exactly.
One quarter. So if you extrapolate that out, then you're talking about $200 million, right?
Yeah, but like I said, there's potentially if our property tax stays strong, that will make up for some of the other revenue sources. But yeah,
it's highly questionable too. I mean, you see rents going down, you see a lot of things. It seems like property tax is going down, but on property tax, there is, the two big variables I see in our projections that we haven't really talked about, both occur on the same day in November, and that is split roll. If that passes, what does that do to our revenues? And then that is also obviously the presidential election and the Senate election, because the difference between the HERO Act and in the Congress of $3 trillion and the Senate of $1 trillion, that could be a very big difference in terms of the amount of money that comes, if any, comes to the city or state. But starting with the first one, split roll, if that passes, does that change our revenue outlook for the fiscal year?
Well, the first thing I want to mention, you said that the minus 50 is not a quarter; it's just 1 month of data. So it's not a quarter as far as.
I got to multiply that by 12.
Yeah, but I mean, because of how revenues are received by the city, it doesn't necessarily work out that way.
But order of magnitude, then you're talking not 200 million, you're talking 600, 700 million.
No, but like I said, because the bulk of our property tax comes in December and then in April, we don't really, you can't really just divide by 12 and say that's what you should be expecting in each of the months.
Okay, no, it makes sense. I mean, most of the money does come later, which is actually more frightening. But back to the split roll, is there any projection in terms of how that would change our revenue outlook if that passed?
No, I actually don't have that information. I do have just a note that it would take the county some time to implement that, and I know I have staff on the line here as well, Melissa Krantz, that may have some more detailed information on that if she's able to chime in. Melissa, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, this is Melissa Krantz from the Office of the CAO. We had spoken to the county about implementation of the split roll, and one of the issues is they don't have market value for these commercial properties, so they would actually have to staff up and reevaluate these properties. Of course, they'd have to do that in probably over a period of several years. And then, of course, this would not impact the current year assessment. So even if we were to see receipts the first year of implementation, it would not be this fiscal year.
So even if that passes, you're saying there'll be zero change?
For this fiscal year, correct.
Even though it goes into effect in January?
Right, because we get the secured roll bills go out usually in fall, and they're then based on what was sent out then, so you would not see it until the next fiscal year.
Okay. That's an interesting thing, although there may be a way to think about that. So if that's not a big variable, then obviously the other November variable could make a big difference. There's no way for you to predict that here, but on the amount of federal assistance that we get. And that could be game-changing in some respects. When you talked about the savings of the hiring freeze not happening, if the SIP actually moves forward, then there'll be even more pressure against doing the hiring freeze because we'll have so many critical positions. All of our senior people will be gone, or not all of it, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of senior people will be leaving, and therefore the pressure to hire more people will be severe. So that is not an assumption I think will be kept. And then the amount that it's costing us, you're saying it's about $40 million. I'm sorry, the amount that the not having got to the threshold or delaying the SIP every month, how much does that cost us?
You mean delaying the furlough?
Delaying the furlough or not being able to implement the SIP. Yes, the two sides of the same coin.
Well, on the general fund side alone, just the general fund dollars that were tied to the furloughs was $80 million. And right now, I believe even if the minimum threshold on the separation incentive program, I believe that would only generate $23 million or so. So it still wouldn't cover the amount needed on the general fund side for the furloughs, and then some of that savings may be tied to special funds, so we wouldn't be able to.
Could you repeat that, because I thought this was a wash? You're saying if we implement the SIP at the minimum threshold, it only saves how much? $23 million?
Correct. It only saves. Actually, looking at some of the numbers, $14 million in the first year
versus $80 million.
Versus on the general fund side, $80 million for furloughs.
Okay. For some reason, I was under the impression that these were more comparable. But the way I'm hearing it now, because when we were talking about it earlier, meaning during the budget cycle, I got the impression they were sort of two ways to achieve the same goal, but you're saying they don't achieve the same goal.
No, and I think it's at the very least in our disclosure documents, we've been clear that even the implementation of a SIP program would not take away the need to implement some savings of either through furloughs or some other savings mechanism. And really, we've always have said that we wouldn't be able to tell you what the savings numbers were until we actually knew who was taking the separation incentive program. Because, if an assistant general manager is taking it, that's a much higher number than an administrative clerk taking the program. So we really need to see the makeup of the SIP participants to be able to provide the savings information.
Okay. Well, thank you for depressing me even more.
Sorry to do that.
That's all right. Got some other questions, but I'll stop for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Bonnet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the other members for asking questions. A lot of what I was asking about was already asked, but it's certainly sobering, although unsurprising. Although I heard a different answer to Mr. Blumenfield's question than I did to Mr. Krikorian's. If as Mr. Krikorian asked, the best case scenario a few months ago was $45 million, and we're already $50 million in a hole, we definitely know that there's no way we're going to be at the best case scenario. And it certainly sounds as if we're going to be a lot closer to the worst case scenario than to the best case scenario. We are now, almost 2 months into the fiscal year. The longer we wait to take action, the more difficult it is, the more our options are narrowed, particularly since some of these changes we may need to make take a while. And there's certain things, I certainly want to make sure we protect that are going to be hard to protect. I mean, we need to be keeping, HSID staffing to help people stay housed and help implement our renter protections. All those things get harder the longer we wait. So with these monthly reports that we're going to be getting, is the CAO going to be making suggested corrective actions for us to take?
The financial status report have typically been where we provide our recommendations for corrective actions. I think the first financial status report will have some of those recommendations. But if we feel there's needs to be action taken a lot sooner, I don't think we're going to shy away from making any recommendations to this body. So if the case arises where we need to provide some speed or direct recommendations, we will do so.
Well, I kind of think we're there. Anything that gets recommended at this point, particularly after the fiscal year has started, where people have sort of psychologically acclimated to, okay, this is what we're going to have this year. Any cuts that happen in the course of a year are going to be very, very difficult to make. And there'll be lots of pushback. So the decision probably is not going to be a fast one. So I think the sooner we start having the difficult conversations, the better.
Yeah, well, one of the main conclusions I want this body to take with them, based on my sobering report, if you will, is a decision point on furloughs. Nobody likes furloughs, nobody wants them, but they're part of the budget, and we need to make a decision on those sooner rather than later. Because if they get delayed any further than October, that already eats into the earmarked amount that was earmarked from the police budget for furloughs, and it also eats into the savings, even if the SIP program, based on the current participant numbers, are approved. And so that's a decision that needs to be made sooner rather than later. And obviously, the SIP will be a decision that this ERC will be making, I think, in the very near future as well.
Okay. I mean, I think the sooner we get things on the table, the better. I mean, I'm hoping we can look at things mean, there's so many different lenses we have to look at these cuts from. There's cuts to you do furloughs. There's automatically cuts to services, and I think one of the things we have to be looking at, particularly now when people are suffering. I mean, the food lines at the mutual aid programs that all of us are helping to do and helping to sponsor, they're not getting any shorter; they're getting longer. So, I think we actually have to be looking at sort of a vulnerability index of some sort when we're looking at cuts, because it is harsh and painful out there, and anything we do has a potential to worsen that. So I want to make sure that as we're looking at what we trim, we're doing hopefully no harm, but certainly the least amount of harm that we can possibly do. Thanks.
Well, that's really a key point, Mr. Bonin. Thank you for making it, because the vast majority of what the city spends out of its general fund is for people. It's not buying things, it's people. And therefore, the only way we have significant savings in this budget is by hurting people. We have a few choices. We can furlough them, or we can lay them off. That's really the only two ways that we can make substantial savings in this budget, especially if we continue to delay actions. It only gets worse. And to Mr. Blumenfield's point, even if the SIP were wildly successful, it never would have been enough to make up for the savings that could have been realized by furloughs from the start. And now that we're this far into the fiscal year, if the trends that Mr. Seha just described continue, and you're right, Mr. Bonin, it is not going to be a $45 million shortfall anymore. That's very clear to me. It's going to be well above that. Folks, there are just only so many places that we can go to find that kind of cuts. And they're not in, negotiating a better deal for buying pencils. It's people. And the more that we cut from those people, the more, all of those employees of ours are also people who have to pay their rent and have to put food on the table for their family and have to, find a way to make a living in the city of Los Angeles and continue to get by here. So when we let those people go, we will be worsening those food lines and all those other things. So it pays to be this sober and discouraging right now, because these are sober and discouraging times. Maybe they'll get better if there are changes in November, if the economy turns around, and yes, if we get help from the federal government, which is long overdue and much needed, that is the only way to avoid the sort of very difficult, hard, painful things that this council is going to have to do. We don't have any choices unless there's help coming from Washington that we aren't seeing yet. So, Mr. Blumenfield,
one thing I'd be interested from seeing from the CAO's office is to the extent that this is something that could be forecast. Mr. Blumenfield, I think it was mentioned earlier that we've got, one package of relief that has been approved by the House, another that is approved by the Senate. What's the difference for the city in terms of what we get and what we can preserve and what we have to cut under one scenario versus the other? I think that's important for folks to know. Thanks.
Mr. Blumenfield?
I wanted to add, we were talking about the very real issue of people being cut. Just for folks who are listening, I know we all know this without saying it, but when you talk about cutting those people, not only are their lives affected, but those are the people who are filling our potholes. Those are the people who are protecting us every day. Those are, for the average person, they might be willing to say out there, cut government bureaucracy, but those people are providing the basic services that are keeping this government moving and keeping the city functioning. Anyway, Just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else, members? Okay. Thank you for this discussion. It's not a pleasant discussion, but it's one that we have to have, and we have to have it at great depth and continuing. So because we're going to continue that discussion, we're going to continue this matter. And so we'll have the financial status report next. And then following that financial status report on September 14th, I'd like to ask the CAO to return to this committee with a further report pursuant to this motion.
Actually, September 14th will probably be even before our first financial status report. So you'll get a preview and even earlier preview of the FSR.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, you're absolutely right. Time is flying past us. Okay, yeah. So September 14th, then the first FSR, and then we'll proceed back with the schedule as we've laid out in the motion. Very good. Thank you very much. So we'll just go ahead and hold this one in committee, and we'll move on to item 11.
Item 11 is a Department of Animal Services report relative to temporary waiver of redemption fees for low-income City of Los Angeles residents negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. At its meeting held on August 19, 2020, the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee approved the recommendations in the Animal Services report.
Okay. Do we have someone from Animal Services and or the CAO to report on this?
Yes, Catherine Chico with the Department of Animal Services.
Welcome.
Thank you. We are requesting authorization to temporarily waive redemption fees on a one-time basis only for low-income residents negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. This will include residents impacted by evictions once moratoriums are lifted. If approved, the one-time waiver would be available to City of Los Angeles low-income pet owners who are 18 years and older. Income eligibility and self-certification of income would follow the same criteria and process as that used for the issuance of free spay and neuter vouchers, which was previously approved by the City Council. Prior to the waiver of redemption fees, the owners will be responsible for payment of all mandatory and outstanding licensing and microchip fees. Approval of this request will impact general fund revenue based upon the number of requests received and the duration of the pandemic. However, waiver costs are offset by daily care and feed costs for pets not redeemed and held over 2 days. And as a note, since the Safer at Home was implemented in March through today, 1,130 pets have been redeemed. And if we had waived those waiver costs for those pets, it would have totaled $51,298 to date. And I could answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Members, questions? Mr. Blumenfield.
Great, thank you. Well, first off, I think it's a great thing to be able to have this so that they can get the cost waived, because we want to encourage people as much as possible. A couple questions though. How is self-certification of the income enough? Are you concerned that it could get abused? How are they going to ensure that the fees go only to low-income folks? Even though, to some extent, even if we get a little bit ripped off in this, it still makes it worthwhile in terms of the program. But there were criticisms of the spay and neuter eligibility requirements, and I just wanted to know if you're doing anything different or what you're doing, and if self-certification is enough.
Well, we were planning on maintaining the self-certification and having them sign a document attesting that is their income. We are planning on reporting on a monthly basis in the FSR. And if we see the numbers, increasing quite a bit, then we may have to evaluate how we're doing the self-certification at that point. And just so you know, during the same period for the prior year, we had 2,885 redemptions versus this year 1,130. So even though we're safer at home, the numbers have gone down, and I believe that could be attributed right now. A lot of homeowners or pet owners, they're not, maybe they're not working, they're at home versus, working and things like that. So our numbers aren't as high as they were the prior year. But we will be monitoring the situation on a monthly basis and reporting on it.
Okay, and then, thank you. And then can the costs come from CARES Act money? I mean, given our budget crisis, even though it's a small amount, every new expenditure means a cut somewhere. So do we know if this is eligible?
I don't know, but I could reach out to the CAO's office to determine whether we can ask for reimbursement through the CARES Act for these costs.
Maybe the CAO on the line, can they answer the question?
This is Susie Rios-Bellinot. I'm the analyst at the CAO's Office for Animal Services, but I'll defer any CARES Act questions to our illustrious Mr. Ceja.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Susie, but I actually do not have an answer. I know there's going to be a CARES Act report later on in this meeting, and maybe at that point we can have some information for you.
That would be great, and I guess I would just encourage pursuing it, even if it's not immediately clear, just as, for all the obvious reasons. I mean, it's a small amount in the scheme of things, but everything is a zero sum when it comes to our general fund at this point, and it's the stakes are high, and I think there is a very strong nexus with COVID, what we're doing. So I'll put that out there. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Mr. Price. Mr. Price. Mr. Price, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, but you are not muted. Try it again, Mr. Price. I'm afraid we're not hearing you.
All right, hold on.
There we go. Now we can hear you.
Got it? Okay, good. Yes. Let's kind of follow up on Bob's question. Obviously, anyone, we benefit from anybody who's ever used these vouchers, but how are we getting the word out to our low-income residents that this is available? Kind of what's the strategy for making that happen?
We could advertise it on our website, and we could also advertise it through social media and different media outlets. We would be able to advertise it through those means and reach out to like the neighborhood councils and notify them if they have their newsletters, and they could post it that way. The residents are aware of the program if it is implemented.
Yeah. I think that would be helpful, and also perhaps getting the word out at the locations where we do the spray and neutering. I know there's activity goes on in my district office, I think once a month. I'm not sure who organizes that, but that's good news to get out to people that can take advantage of it.
Yes, we could notify all of our spay and neuter partners and ask them to advertise it in their facilities or at their events also.
And the range, it seems to be, pretty broad. You say from 20,000 to 100,000, based on the number of folks that receive the benefit.
Well, we were just. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We were just using that as an estimate to give an idea of, the low end at 10% up to 50%, what it would be should the council approve this request.
Okay, and the 50% is the 100,000?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's a great, I think, program. We just make sure we get the word out to those that can take advantage of it.
Yes, we most definitely will.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, members? Okay. Seeing none. The recommendation is to concur with the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee and approve the Department of Animal Services recommendations. So if there's no other questions or comments, let's go ahead and call the roll on that recommendation, please.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Koretz.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
5 ayes. This matter is approved to concur with the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee and approve the Department of Animal Services recommendations.
Very good. Thank you. That brings us then to item 14.
Item number 14 is the Collections Board of Review report relative to delinquent accounts receivables submitted by the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety, Housing and Community Investment Department of Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles Department of Transportation.
Thank you. And we can hear just a brief report on this, please. I have a couple of brief questions. I don't know if any other members will, but go right ahead.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. My name is Shane Min, and I represent the Controller's Office, who is the chair of the Board of Review. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
All right. The item before you are write-out requests from the Building and Safety, Transportation, Housing, and Community Development Departments for accounts owing more than $5,000 as required by the Administrative Code. The board recommends that the council approve the write-off as well as all reasonable collection efforts have been exhausted. The board and representatives of the departments are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody other than me have any questions on this? Okay, Mr. Blumenfield. We can't hear you, sir.
Okay. The DOT report shows that one vehicle, it was had a VAH 8039 license plate, got more than 100 tickets between October 2015 and June of 2017. That's about 5 tickets a month. How is it that this vehicle didn't get booted or impounded, or what happened? And now we're writing that off.
Honorable Council Member, I believe we have a representative from the Department of Transportation on the call to answer the question. Mark, please take it away.
Good afternoon. This is Mark Renato, Department of Transportation, Division Manager of Parking Operations and Support. I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, so most of the motorists or vehicles that are on the list, we've taken exhaustive efforts to find out where that we can send them their notices of these citations, and oftentimes we don't get a hit of an address in the DMV, so they continuously get a citation, the notice goes out, and it's never received. So we'll either get documentation back into our system that the individual never received the citation, and so it doesn't go on a flag of to our enforcement to say, okay, we need to go ahead and put a boot or impound this vehicle. But I can touch base with our enforcement division just to confirm that as well, so we can report back on that.
But there's not a number like after 50 tickets. Is that not, even if you haven't found the person's address, is that enough to put a boot on it?
So it has to go through the whole cycle of the citation being put onto the windshield, and then it goes into our system of a notice being mailed out to them. And we're legally obligated to send out that notice based on California Vehicle Code. And if we're not able to send that document out and confirm that they've received it, or we are able to find an address, then we're just kind of not able to find them. So let me confirm with our enforcement just to see if there's other mechanisms to flag them. because this vehicle could be moving around.
Well, I'm sure the vehicle is moving around all over the place. Is there? And when you say legal, is this a city law we can change, or is this
this is the California state law?
That the state law says unless you have an address to mail it to them, and they don't have to be in the DMV system.
There are times when there's an out-of-state, vehicle that has an out-of-state license plate. They're not in our California vehicle, in the DMV. So, but there's other mechanisms that our processing agency uses to try and get a hit on doing some tracing and finding that license plate. But even then, sometimes those aren't found. But we can research further to see if our system, if it's a system flaw that's not flagging them, to inform enforcement that, hey, you know what, this vehicle has 50 citations. Let's go ahead and see if we can get a boot. So let me work with enforcement, and we can get a report back to you.
Yeah, I'd love to have a follow-up. 100 tickets, it's crazy. So we'd love to get a follow-up on that, and also just recommendations as to what, if there's something we need to change, in our systems or even in state law, then we should do so, because it's a lot of wasted time and money, and then right now to go through it for this. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kretz, did you have a question on this? Thought I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask if I know we've looked at this issue in the past. Do we ever sell uncollected debt at pennies on the dollar so we can get something and let someone else collect it at their expense?
Is this question directed to DOT or back to Shane?
I think that would probably be to Shane.
I think it comes back to the board. Council member, we have the Office of Finance has sold debt in the past to varying levels of success. Avo, are you on the call? Can you shed any light on whether we've sold any debt lately?
This is Avo Dwidian from Office of Finance. I don't have that information. I would have to get back to the committee.
That's all I have.
Okay. My question is somewhat similar to Mr. Blumenfield's, except to building and safety, because I know that, first of all, it's totally understandable for the members of the public who may be listening in. At some point, debt becomes uncollectible. It gets past the statute of limitations to take legal action, and it has to be written off because it's uncollectible. But I guess my question goes more to what happens before that, before it becomes uncollectible. And with regard to some of the building and safety obligations in this report, some of them were directed to a property owner in my district who was not in compliance with regard to a shopping mall that was largely blighted and mostly abandoned. And we've been quite forceful in trying to ensure compliance to reduce that blight. And so I happen to know, because I know this property so well, that every property owner that we've gone through in the time that I've been in the council has been readily able to pay their fines. So why is it that this has become uncollectible? Why have we not collected it? Why have we not sued? Why have we not attached a lien or taken some other action to ensure that when scofflaws violate our law, particularly when they're wealthy property owners, that they're not held to account for that?
So if I may, Shane, this is Tony Pelias from the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety. In regards to the invoices that were issued for that particular property owner, they're all code violation inspection fees. Our records show that the property changed ownership about 3 months after the invoices were issued. So they were mostly issued in September. The property changed ownership in December. Normally for these type of invoices, we do have the ability to lien the property, which we find is very effective in collecting the fees that are outstanding. But because the ownership changed, that was not an option that we have available.
So the initial obligation doesn't run with the land until a lien is attached?
That is correct, yes.
Oh, that's really unfortunate. Okay. So anything that happens subsequent to the change of ownership, presumably, could be enforced up to and including a lien?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else, members, on this item? Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, the recommendation will be to approve the Collections Board of Review recommendations. And let's go ahead and call the roll.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Price, aye.
Koretz.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
5 ayes. This item is approved.
Very good. Thank you very much. That will bring up item number 21, please.
Item number 21 is a finance report relative to a summary of the tax penalty amnesty program for fiscal year 2020-21 and related actions.
Okay, do we have someone to offer a report on this matter?
Yes, council member. My name is Diana Mangiolu, and this is my first time presenting in this capacity. I'm representing the Office of Finance. Well, I'm, as of July 5th, the interim Director of Finance and interim City Treasurer.
And congratulations on that, and we're delighted to have you in our committee in this new capacity.
Thank you very much. And I am joined today by Carl Sampson, our Assistant General Manager. And we are here to present the issue before you and answer any questions. The report before you essentially is a proposal for a tax penalty amnesty program. It's a program that the city has offered before in years past, in 2013, 2009, and 2001. Essentially, we would be offering taxpayers who are delinquent in their taxes an opportunity to pay any back penalties and interest that they have incurred. I'm sorry, any principal and interest that they have incurred, and essentially waiving penalties. It's a voluntary program, no questions asked. We would be up to 40% on average of taxpayers' delinquent bill could potentially be waived. The window of opportunity for the proposal would begin in October and end in December. It is a one-time source of general fund revenue. Based on years past, we've been able to collect over $20 million in revenue when we've done the amnesty program. We hope that we would be able to collect $20 million in this particular fiscal year, but given our economic circumstances, it is possible that we may be collecting less. So we're projecting a $15 to $20 million potential in revenue. As Office of Finance, we would need some resources in order to effectuate the program. We would plan to launch a public outreach and communications plan that would cost approximately $95,000, and that would include doing mailers, it would include doing radio spots, and of course communicating through all of our regular norms of communication, including Channel 35 and neighborhood councils, and through your offices, through the mayor's office. We would also need to fill tax compliance officer positions in order to effectuate the program. We are, in our report, we are requesting that the CAO's office consider 10 positions for TCOs. And that is, I think that pretty much summarizes what I wanted to share on it, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. Thank you very much. And this has been a great success when we've done it in the past. What was the most recent time when we did this? I think last time I recall was still in the Great Recession when we did this.
The last time the Amnesty program was in effect and implemented was in 2013, and we were successful enough to collect $24.3 million. We do anticipate that whatever revenue we generate, that we collect it within this fiscal year, and we would work with our taxpayers to structure their payment so that we collect it effectively to that.
Very good. Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it seems like this is always a good idea. I'm just curious how much of it would come in typically during a period like this if there wasn't a tax amnesty.
Well, so we, as part of our office's operations, have a tax enforcement program, and so we generate revenue through the tax enforcement efforts that we do through mailers, through actually going out to businesses. But in this particular situation, we would essentially be utilizing our existing list of taxpayers who are delinquent and offering them an opportunity to pay their principal and interest. So if we had not done this tax penalty amnesty program, then we wouldn't anticipate collecting anything from it.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I suspect it'll be a little less because of our economic situation, but it would be surprising if we collected less than $15 million, which is a good chunk, and if there ever was a time where we could use it, this is it. So, sounds great to me.
Thank you. Mr. Blumenfield.
Just curious, does finance have information about the kind of locations of businesses, the kinds of businesses and the locations of businesses that took advantage of the earlier amnesty programs? That might shed some light on how effective it might be during this. And Canada probably was not as active last time around, and I wonder how much you might expect from that industry.
I'm going to defer to Carl Sampson to answer this question. Carl?
All right. Hi, Carl Sampson, Assistant Director of Finance. Everyone can hear me fine?
Yes.
All right. Basically, in past amnesties, most of the receipts were really from business taxes. About 80% or more of the total receipts were focused on that tax, and that came from a variety of different businesses that are out there. In addition to businesses that have current liabilities that we're pursuing, this also provides an opportunity for businesses that may not be in compliance. Businesses that may have some advisement from their accounting firms that this is an opportunity to get into compliance, at an advantageous rate for them. So we have some of that activity as well.
What kind of, like, is it restaurants? Is it retail? Is it for the financial industry? Is there any method to the madness, or?
Yeah, I don't have those breakdowns, but it's going to be primarily focused on industries that do have a larger amount of tax receipts that are due, and so for smaller businesses, I think we'll we'll have that in quantity. You know, for each of the past two amnesties that we've done in 2013 and 2009, we had approximately 9,000 businesses take advantage of that program at that time for each of those programs. And so, you know, so I think, you know, the majority of them will be smaller businesses, but of course the majority of monies are going to be related to businesses that have more sizable operations. And what we don't know is if there's any, businesses that are out there that may have substantial obligations that we don't know about. And so that's an opportunity for those to come to light.
And in terms of cannabis, is that a unique target group? Because they weren't around they weren't around legally the last time we did one of these. And
yeah, certainly there's a lot of effort that we do in focusing on cannabis enforcement. One of the things that's unique about them is that they do have monthly liabilities, and those liabilities, satisfying those liabilities, are tied to their ability to operate. And so we had just trued up the tax liabilities for all of the firms in order for them to continue to operate in 2020. And so we've trued up most of their liabilities all the way through 2019. And so at this point, it would be just those operators that would have some outstanding liabilities during 2020 that might be able to take advantage of this. But we have less of a opportunity there, just because the enforcement has been much more tighter because it's tied into their ability to operate.
That's good. That's good to know, and was maybe counterintuitive. But so we should not expect any big amount coming from cannabis. It's really the standard businesses that may have been taking advantage of this in the past that might come out and do it.
Yeah, that would be our expectation.
Thank you.
Anything else, members? I think this is terrific, and I'm glad that we're going to move forward on this. The one thing I would ask of finance is I think it would be useful to compare those businesses that received this waiver in 2009 and in 2013, and then also this year, to see whether there are repeat customers. Because when we do this year, it should be very clear that this can't be the ordinary way of doing business. That you don't pay your taxes for a few years and then you pay it later and you don't get fined for it. So I don't know if that's feasible to do in an easy way, but I do think we should move forward with this program regardless. And then before we were to approve a future penalty waiver, we should have a sense of whether or not there are people who've taken advantage of it multiple times.
That's something that we certainly can do. And, for those that would be on the list, that perhaps would be a good list for us to do audits in the future.
Indeed. Very good point. Okay, very good. Well, members, the recommendation is to approve the Office of Finance's recommendations and instruct the CAO with the assistance of the Office of Finance to identify a funding source with the possibility of repayment to that source should the tax penalty amnesty program generate sufficient general fund revenues. And if there's no other discussion, let's go ahead and call the roll.
And Mr. Chair, for the record, just to clarify, will you also be adding the request for a report back regarding the businesses that are taking advantage or that have taken advantage of the amnesty program?
Yeah, I think let's go ahead and do that as a report back. Thank you.
Thank you. Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Tourette's.
Aye.
Blumenfield. Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
All right. Very good. That will take us to item number 23.
Item number 23 is a motion Harris-Dawson, Koretz-Price relative to approving resolution position authorities subject to the allegation by the Personnel Department and pay grade determination by the CAO from August 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021 for 1 police deputy chief 1, 2 police captain 3s, 1 police administrator 2, and 1 executive administrative assistant 2 in the police department to staff the department's new Community Safety Partnership Bureau, and directing the department to hold vacant 1 management analyst position and reduce sworn hiring by 8 positions to offset the cost of these new resolution and position authorities. The Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee waived consideration of the above matter.
Okay, thank you. Members, any, well, yeah, it is a motion, so we don't need a report yet. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I totally support this. I was excited to be at the press conference when the mayor announced that CSP was going to become a bureau, full bureau. I think part of it has been a real positive program in community policing in our city. Has been very effective in CD9. But to be effective, you got to have people to work it. And so I totally support this personnel request. I think it's reasonable. I think it's a good step and demonstrates that we're serious about supporting this program in a way that provides some accountability and some transparency. So I would support it, and I'm happy to join others in approving it at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Price. Mr. Bonnet.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on this. I know there's a lot of folks who think this is great, a lot of folks who think it's not. Just want to be sure that, I just want clarification, that this is not adding any money to the police department budget. This is taking resources that are already allocated and reprogramming them for this purpose?
This is Tyler Munhall with the CAO. Correct. This does not add any money to the police department. They're simply going to hold positions vacant to generate savings within their salary accounts to pay for these positions.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're not sort of reversing what we did just a couple months ago. So no net increase to the department's budget. Is there potential this actually generates some savings?
Holding various positions vacant will generate savings. Filling the positions will generate costs.
Okay, thanks.
Members, anything further on this? Ms. Huber, did you want to? Okay, there we go. Well, I just want to say I wholly agree with Mr. Price. I think CSPs have been a tremendous success. No less of an authority than Connie Rice has said that these are, you know, one of the best examples you can have of the kind of police reforms that build positive relationships between communities and the police. And so I'm grateful to the authors for bringing this forward and moving along the progress towards CSP. So the recommendation is to approve the motion and instruct the CAO to work with the police department to ensure that the addition and deletion of positions is fully cost neutral. And on that recommendation, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Koretz.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin. Mr. Bonin, I believe you're muted.
Oh, I said with the chair's direction to make sure it's cost neutral, I'm an aye.
Thank you. 5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
Thank you very much. Okay, that will bring us to item number 26.
Item number 26 is a Budget and Finance Committee report and communication from the Chair of the Immigrant Affairs, Civil Rights, and Equity Committee relative to the status of the Los Angeles Justice Fund and amending motion from Cedillo Rodriguez relative to authorizing the $1 million allocation in fiscal year 2020-21 adopted budget for a 1-year extension of the Justice Fund and authorizing the CAO to execute an amendment to the agreement with the California Community Foundation for continued implementation of the Justice Fund for a one-year term. This is scheduled pursuant to Council action of August 19th, 2020, and has also been referred to the Immigrant Affairs and Civil Rights and Equity Committee.
Thank you. Do we have somebody here who can report? And actually, I think we can forego the report. We'll just go straight to questions because this is the second time in short order that this committee has actually heard this matter. The last time we advanced it to council upon the recommendations of the CLA and the Immigrant Affairs Committee, both of which said that this funding should be advanced but limited to existing cases. That was changed there was a motion to change that on the floor of the council after it had gone through committee, both committees. And so that is why we're back before the Budget and Finance Committee again today, because of that change, to change the appropriation to encompass the possibility of including future cases as well. So with that, Mr. Kretz, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say this is a great program. I think it's totally necessary, and I modeled my proposal on eviction defense from a few years ago based on the results that legally representing immigrants greatly increases their chances of prevailing in court, and the same is true with tenants. If they're represented, they are much less likely to be evicted. I do have a question, though. Recommendation number 2 suggests a new plan and MOU to strengthen the program. So I wanted to know what experiences the Justice Fund program has had that led to this recommendation.
Hi, this is Felipe Chavez. I'm with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. We prepared a report that was presented in the Immigrant Affairs Committee back in March. And along with that option, we presented a number of options for council consideration. So it was not necessarily a recommendation by the CLA, but both the Budget Committee and the Immigrant Affairs Committee adopted all recommendations, which basically asked CLA, CAO, and other staff to report back on all the options before moving on to the future of the program. This particular recommendation or option that you are referring to basically is asking staff to come back on I believe it's the one you're talking about, on a multi-year program, right? Working with the county and the legal service representatives, legal service providers, and come up with options sometime in the next few months and present to you options to consider beyond this one-year extension.
Oh, okay. So it's not making significant changes in what you're planning to do. It's just planning to extend it off into the future.
Correct. The extension, the extension before you, the recommendation, the option to extend it for 1 year is only an extension of the existing program as it is. It's not making any additional changes to the program.
Okay, I misunderstood that.
The only recommendation that was also adopted by both of these committees was to restrict it to existing cases, and that piece of it is the only difference between the previous program and the extension. If that is changed, then to open to new cases for any reason, then it would be exactly the same program.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bonin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can be very, very brief. I believe when this was last in committee, which was either last week or the week before, I had asked about the potential of taking on existing cases. So I was glad to see the motion from Mr. Cedillo and Ms. Rodriguez, and I will support it. Thanks.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah, no, I'm certainly in support as well. I should say, though, that in 71 days, something will happen that will make the need for this dramatically different potentially. Whether we know that the heinous immigration policies of this administration are going to be continued for and worsened for 4 years, or whether it's going to be changed, may very well change the way that the program operates and what it focuses on, because hopefully we'll have dramatic changes in our immigration, some of the immigration issues at that point. But so anyways, looking at the options is good. I just think whatever we look at, we should look at after the election.
Excellent point. Mr. Price, anything on this?
Just, I certainly support this. This is again, an important way for us to demonstrate to our immigrant neighbors that we are serious. I had a similar fund kind of focusing on CD9 at about $1 million over the past 2 years. It's been very successful. I think this builds upon that and continues to provide much needed resources to a community that is in much need. And so I'm hopeful, as Mr. As Mr. Blumenfeld said, that hopefully with the election we'll have a whole different mindset, and we won't have the need for these types of programs. But in the meantime, we do, and I'm prepared to support this for another year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Bonnet.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to add one note. While I am optimistic that things will change dramatically in January, I do want to underscore that there could be as much need for this now as after January, given that the previous administration had set records for deportations. And there were a lot of problems with immigration policy that continued under the Obama administration. So regardless of what's happening in Washington, there may still be a need to be standing up for Angelenos. Thanks.
So given that discussion, let me share a couple thoughts. First of all, I am supportive of moving forward with this as I was before. I think giving the providers the flexibility of taking on new cases within the same funding allotment makes sense and is acceptable. But I need to emphasize within the same funding allotment, because this very discussion we've just had about whether or not there will be a continuing need goes to the very core of the debate over this program in the beginning. Everyone, I think, agrees that this is an incredibly important and valuable program. Where the challenge is whether this is a program that the city of Los Angeles and its taxpayers should be responsible for. And there was an emergency need for this, given the state of affairs under the Trump administration and the actions that were being taken. But I continue to be very concerned about mission creep on the part of this city and expanding the number of issues that this city is going to take on as its burden to try to fix, when we are struggling even to pay for the basic city services that this city must provide under its charter. The reason that the city government exists, we are falling short on even doing that. So if the philanthropic world continues to support this effort, I think that would be of great value. But this is not, in my view, no one on this call, no one listening to this meeting should assume that this is adoption of a continuing obligation of the city of Los Angeles that we will continue to be funding ad infinitum. It is not, and I would not support that kind of a program. This is important for us to move forward now, and I will support it, and I will support it with the amendment to include the new funding sources, but the city cannot pay for every need that there is out there when we can't even pay for the basic city functions that the city is expected already to provide. So with that, I do have one. I would like to add a few points.
as part of the report back, we will include what other sources of funds are available for legal representation. My understanding is that the state provides $65 million for legal services, of which some of it is for deportation defense. So as part of the report back, we will include how, what the panorama would be if the council does not continue to fund it. So we would provide those options for council at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. That would be very welcome. And that's the point I've made many times. The county, for example, provides a public defender for cases that are being criminally prosecuted. The city prosecutes criminal cases, but does not pay for a public defender. That is a county obligation, not an obligation of the city. So finding other sources like that are more appropriate than the city's general fund to provide these very essential, important services that we all agree are essential and important would be a most welcome development. So thank you for that, Mr. Chavez. And with that, I would recommend that we approve the communication from the chair of the Immigrant Affairs, Civil Rights, and Equity Committee and the Budget and Finance Committee report as amended to adopt a revised recommendation number 1 as follows. Authorize the $1 million allocation in the fiscal year 2021 adopted budget for a 1-year extension of the LHAF from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 to allow grantees to continue to provide legal representation services to new and existing cases. And B, adopt a new recommendation number 7 as provided below. Authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute an amendment to the agreement with CCF for continued implementation of the LHAF for a 1-year term effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 21 in an amount not to exceed $1 million, dispersed per a payment schedule in accordance with the scope of work, reporting requirements, and program deliverables as outlined in the amendment, subject to the availability of funds, compliance with city contracting requirements, and the city attorney as to form and legality. And if there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and call the roll, please.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Koretz.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to item number 27.
Item number 27 are CAO reports relative to the COVID-19 Emergency Response Account, General City Purposes Fund Status Report for the weeks ending April 3rd, 2020 through August 14th, 2020.
Hi, good afternoon.
You're reporting on this? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon. Samantha Ju with the Office of the City Administrative Officer.
Welcome.
Since our discussion on expenditures from the COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund on August 10th, 2020, 2 weekly status reports have been released. For the week ending August 7th, 2020, approximately $391,000 in expenditures was approved by the mayor for the following: Zoom licenses and Zoom use training, PPE, and continued funding to support temporary shelters and hygiene services for the homeless population. For the week ending August 14, 2020, approximately $8.6 million was approved for the Senior Meals Program and equipment for city testing sites. As of August 14, 2020, approximately $146 million in expenditures has been approved since March to various departments to continue the city's response to the pandemic. And to kind of address Councilmember Blumenfield's question on reimbursing the fees for animal services. So while the federal guidelines are pretty broad in the eligibility of some costs, the city has the ability to determine what's a necessary expenditure. They make it very clear that we can't use these funds to cover any revenue shortfalls. So if we give funds directly to the department with the intention of kind of covering any lost revenue, then that would be an ineligible expense. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Okay, thank you. So just in case we went through that a little too quickly, since March, the direct emergency response costs related to the city's immediate response to the pandemic has been $146 million since March.
Correct.
Okay. So sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's the funding we've provided as a front funding to departments or reimbursement purposes. So we'll cover kind of things that they've already spent and things that they intend to spend.
Okay. Okay, very good. And how much of that how do you divide that between the 1920 fiscal year and the 2021 fiscal year?
So we've actually kind of kept track of expenditures that before 1920. We reappropriated any funds in 1920 to 2021 so we can keep our funding available to us. But we do have a list of things that our office is putting together all our expenditures made in 1920 and 2021.
So I guess what I want to get to is for this fiscal year, what do we have budgeted for these purposes, and how much of what we have budgeted have we spent?
The mayor's office has a breakdown of what they expect. The funding that we have was actually only expected to last around August, September. We currently have a remaining balance of approximately $69 million, so I feel like we're but for a specific breakdown, I'd be happy to return with that information.
Yes, please. As we have these regular reports, it's important that we have that so that we can track this spending and its impact on the budget, keeping in mind, in furtherance of Mr. Blumenfield's earlier point, that we do have a significant, still unappropriated amount of money in our CARES Act money to utilize for emergency response as well. But to the extent that this is going to be impacting the general fund in ways that are not immediately reimbursable, considering the state of what we have budgeted already, those increasing expenses, we're going to have to track very carefully to see where we're going to have to make additional cuts in other services in order to pay for these emergency responses. Members, any questions on this one? Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, and I appreciate you answering the question about animal services, because it relates to a lot of other departments. And I think what I heard as your answer, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that it is reimbursable as long as the express purpose is not to make up for lost funding. As long as there is a COVID-related purpose, it's kosher. But if the moment that you start saying that the purpose of this is to make up for lost revenue, then it becomes ineligible. So a lot of it is the same dollars. It's kind of how you frame it and what is its actual purpose. Is that correct?
Correct. It really is how the city chooses to use the funding. So let's say you want to provide emergency financial assistance to the city residents. That's perfectly okay and within guidelines.
Well, like on the animal services issue, I mean, if we're allowing folks to get, because we're worried about people being at home, and we're allowing the redemptions to be waived because of COVID and because of the fact that people have been economically damaged by COVID, then it's okay. But if we say that we're doing it so that we don't have a revenue shortfall, then it's not okay. So it's not the action; it's the rationale.
Councilmember, this is Patty Huber from the CAO. The other related issue, though, is how these people are paying when they redeem their animal. They're paying the city, and we're waiving that payment. So what exactly would the CARES funding be used for? It would be used to basically pay the payment we weren't receiving, which is essentially lost revenue. That's where it gets to be difficult to say this is an eligible expenditure.
I guess when I look at it as we're in essence we're waiving it because they're in a financial hurt because of COVID, and that's why we're subsidizing it or waiving. I mean, it's the same. You know, I look at lost revenue as the same as a subsidy. You know, it's us deciding as a city that we want to subsidize this activity because of the situation that the constituents have.
But we budgeted that revenue. And the other thing we can't do is something that was part of our budget. We budgeted on the assumption we would have some level of redemption. So it's a very difficult conversation to have, and I don't see that. I think it would really be looked at as some form of revenue replacement.
I hear what you're saying, and I guess we need to think about that in terms of as we make all these budget adjustments, not just here, but in other areas, making sure that we don't undercut our ability to get some of these revenues by the way that we frame our budget adjustments. But it may not matter for. I mean, maybe this one is too difficult or too cute by half to get the reimbursements on. But there are a lot of other potential reimbursements that are a little bit more gray. But that's just an observation. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, members, on this one? Any other questions? Okay. So this was continued from the previous meeting. I guess we can just note and file this report, but we'll be getting similar reports at future meetings as well. So let's go ahead and call the roll on noting and filing this report.
Thank you. And just to clarify, we'll be noting and filing all of the CAO reports pending on the file, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Koretz. Koretz. Blumenfield.
Looks like he's frozen.
Oh.
Mr. Koretz?
Oh, I didn't hear anything. Aye.
Thank you. Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
5 ayes. These items will be noted and filed.
Very good. Thank you very much. Are there any other items in the open session portion of our agenda before the committee?
The rest of the items are closed session. Please note for item 8, there is an option to go into closed session.
Okay, item number 8. Well, members, on item number 8, does anybody need to ask any questions on item 8 in closed session? Anybody want to ask any questions on that one? I don't see any. So in that case, it would be my recommendation to approve the city attorney's request for funding and term extension of outside counsel contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Call the roll on this, please.
Actually, the detailed recommendations are only listed in the confidential report. May I read those into the record?
No. So then apparently we'll need to go ahead and do that in closed session. So hold that one on the desk for now, and let's go ahead and proceed into closed session.
Thank you. One moment.
Okay, we are now back. This is the Budget and Finance Committee, August 24th, 2020. We are now back in open session. We have considered items 1 through 8 in closed session. There's nothing to report out, but we do now need to take an action on item number 8. So if there is no objection, we can go ahead and approve the recommendations.
Thank you. And the recommendations are as follows. 1. Transfer $1,500,000 from the unappropriated balance outside council, including workers' compensation line item, to the City Attorney Fund 100, Department Number 12, account number 009301. 2. Authorize the City Attorney to amend to increase maximum compensation for the following contracts by these respective amounts. Contract 134975, Arnold Golden, by $24,873. Contract 133518, Kaplan Kirsch Rockwell, by $186,127. Contract 135524, Hogan Lovells, by $800,000. Contract 132070, Law Offices of Christopher Wong, by $49,000. Contract 128735, Orbeck, Huff, Suarez, and Henderson, by $440,000. 3. Authorize the City Attorney to extend Contract C134975 with Arnold Golden to December 31st, 2020. 4. Authorize the City Attorney to extend its Contract 128213 with Downey Brand to August 11, 2022. 5. Authorize the City Attorney to extend its Contract C131106 with Downey Brand to September 28, 2022. 6. Authorize the City Attorney to extend its Contract C130439 with Downey Brand to October 11, 2022. 7. Authorize the City Attorney to extend its Contract 127651 with Liebert Cassidy Whitmore to January 31st, 2022. 8. Authorize the City Attorney to extend its Contract 121421 with Myers Nave to September 26, 2022. 9. Authorize the City Attorney to extend its Contract 130402 with Sanders Roberts to July 9, 2022. 10. Authorize the City Attorney to amend its Contract 132207 with Best and Krieger to add the sum of $150,000 as funded by ITA's TDA Fund and to add a billing category for paralegals. 11. Authorize the City Attorney to enter into contingency contracts with Rose Klein and Marius and Laughlin, Falbo, Levy, and Morrissey for assistance with subrogation work. And finally, recommendation number 12, authorize the City Attorney or designee to prepare controller instructions for any necessary technical adjustments subject to the approval of the CAO and authorize the controller to implement the instructions. Thank you.
All right. With that, members, if there's no objection to approving all of those recommendations, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Koretz.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
5 ayes. The recommendations will be approved.
Very good. Is there any other business before the committee?
The desk is clear.
Members, thank you all very much for your endurance and to staff as well for sticking with us. Good discussion, good meeting. Thank you all very much. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.